My name is Michael Lilley. This is my History of Art Assignment 2, Task 2, submitted on Monday the 12th January 2015.
Studying the history of art and design is a great way to develop a visual vocabulary. Not only does this potentially save time and money for design, it allows you to build on ideas that have already been done and put your own spin on it to make them better. Here's a quick look at a visual timeline that I created for my class. 1865 to 1885 saw Impressionism. Impressionism is a 19th century art movement that originated with a group of Paris-based artists such as Claude Monet. Characteristics include relatively small, thin, yet visible brushstrokes, open composition, and an emphasis on capturing light and often movement. Post-Impressionism, from 1885 to 1910, was a soft revolt against Impressionism, using vivid colours, often thick application of paint, and a real-life subject matter, but they were more inclined to emphasise geometric forms, to distort form for expressive effect, and to use unnatural or arbitrary colour. From 1890 to 1910, we saw Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau was inspired by natural forms and structures, not only in flowers and plants, but also in curved lines. Architecture tried to harmonise with the natural environment. Art Deco from 1890 to 1910. The term Art Deco refers to a style that spanned the boom of the roaring 1920s and the bust of the depression-ridden 1930s. It affected all forms of design, from the fine and decorative arts to fashion, film, photography, transport and product design. From 1900 to 1920, we've seen Fauvism. Fauvism is the style of Les Faux, a loose group of early 20th century modern artists whose work emphasised painterly qualities and strong colour over the representational or realistic values retained by Impressionism. 1890 to 1934, we saw Expressionism. Expressionism was a modernist movement, initially in poetry and painting, originating in Germany at the beginning of the 20th century. Its typical trait is to present the world solely from a subjective perspective, distorting it radically for emotional effect in order to evoke moods or ideas. From 1909 to 1915, we saw Futurism. Futurism emphasised and glorified themes associated with contemporary concepts of the future, including speed, technology, youth and violence, and objects such as the car, the aeroplane and the industrial city. 1907 to 1920, Cubism, an avant-garde movement that revolutionised European painting and sculpture and inspired related movements in music, literature and architecture. Objects are analysed, broken up and reassembled in an abstracted form. 1916 to 1922, Dada. The movement primarily involved visual arts, literature, poetry, art manifestos, art theory, theatre and graphic design. It concentrated its anti-war politics through a rejection of the prevailing standards in art through anti-art cultural works. 1919 to 1933, Bauhaus, an art school in Germany that combined crafts and the fine arts and was famous for the approach to design that it publicised and taught. It operated from 1919 to 1933. In the same year we saw De Stijl, or the style, also known as Neoplasticism. It was a Dutch artist movement founded in 1917 in Amsterdam. The De Stijl consisted of artists and architects. In a narrow sense, the term De Stijl is used to refer to a body of work from 1917 to 1931 founded in the Netherlands. 1924 to 1950, Surrealism. Surrealist artists painted unnerving, illogical scenes with photographic precision, created strange creatures from everyday objects and developed painting techniques that allowed the unconscious to express itself, an idea or a concept. 1950 to 1970, Pop art. Pop art is a movement that emerged in the mid-1950s in Britain and in the late 1950s in the United States. Pop art presented a challenge to traditions of fine art by including imagery from popular culture such as advertising, news, etc. 1950 to 1970, op art. Op art, also known as optical art, is a style of visual art that makes use of optical illusions. Op art works are abstract, and many of the better known pieces made in black and white. When the viewer looks at them, the impression is given of movement, hidden images, flashing and vibrations, patterns, or alternatively, swelling or warping. 1990 to present day, hyperrealism. Hyperrealism is a genre of painting and sculpture resembling a high-resolution photograph. Hyperrealism is considered an advancement in photorealism by the methods used to create the resulting paintings or sculptures. The term is primarily applied to an independent art movement, an art style in the United States and Europe. 1990 to present day, we've seen Brit art. The name Brit art was given to a loose group of visual artists who first began to exhibit together in London in 1988. Noted for shock tactics, use of throwaway materials, wild living and an attitude both oppositional and entrepreneurial. I will now discuss my research on the art movement Art Deco and describe how this particular movement, including an artist, has inspired modern day art and design. Using this research, I will explain how the movement's techniques and style have contributed to my own design work and how I can continue using these attributes in further projects. Art Deco was the most fashionable international design movement in modern art from 1925 until the 1940s. The movement embraced all types of art, including crafts as well as fine arts, much like the German Bauhaus design school concept. It was applied to decorative art like interior design, furniture, textiles, jewellery, fashion and industrial design, as well as architecture. Art Deco's geometric designs dominated the New York skyline, with now famous buildings such as the Chrysler Building and the Rockefeller Center. Art Deco came to life against the backdrop of what we now call the Roaring Twenties. The machine age was in full swing and technology was rapidly improving the quality of life. This was the age that introduced the radio, the printing press, the skyscraper and modernised transportation. Characteristics common in all forms of Art Deco were attributes such as geometric forms, the likes of spheres, polygons, rectangles, chevrons and sunburst motifs. The elements tend to be arranged in symmetrical pattern. The feeling of modernism came from the materials that were used, such as aluminium, stainless steel and chrome. Many of the projects from the movement used vivid and high contrasting colours, a style that is still effective in modern day advertisements. Here we have an example of Art Deco graphic design which is promoting a brand of cigarettes titled Nirma. We see the lady smoking sitting down in a sideways manner mirror, that of the Egyptian wall paintings, and dressed in Egyptian style clothing, sitting down on what looks like the Great Sphinx monument. The cigarettes are also named Egyptians. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in November 1922 spawned a worldwide fascination with all things Egyptian, further contributing to the evolving aesthetic of Art Deco. The Egyptians' use of gold and the colour blue replicated a rich royal feel. This works well in order to demonstrate the feeling of luxury and wealth that the Art Deco era wanted to promote after World War I and the Great Depression of 1929. Colours in any type of design can be linked to how the viewer perceives them. For example, blue is often related to royalty, and although it is referred to as a cold colour, it can still be welcoming when paired with other colours. The colour gold that is used in this particular poster contrasts with the blue, making important information on the poster stand out to the audience. This yellowish gold is warming and welcoming, and research shows that people link this colour to richness, wealth, offering the feeling of importance to the advertising brand. As leisurely travel came into fashion, a need for advertising exotic destinations to the young and prosperous became progressively more important. Major advances in graphic design were happening during this time, and in turn, there was a massive producing of advertising solutions that came out of the Art Deco era, most notably the travel poster. This movement towards graphic design, in my opinion, is what I enjoy most about this movement. The posters are less about conveying emotion and more about creating a visual, appealing way to target an audience. This poster advertising travel via sea, called L'Atlantique, incorporates that modern feel of Art Deco. The ship is built using geometric shapes and has been simplified into an iconic image. This use of simplicity is used consistently in modern day design. Quite often designers would use white space in order to separate information on a page or bring attention to elements they want the viewer to see. White space isn't locked to having the colour white, it can be a gap in the activity on the image to allow the eyes to rest in between elements. The poster of L'Atlantique uses white space in the form of simple geometric shapes. Large, simple, solid colours allow for the eye to fully enjoy the advertisement, helping the audience to travel down the page to the information at the bottom. Looking at the design of Art Deco, there was a lot of detail paid towards new modern fonts. Sleek, bold, flowing shapes and lines give life to some very beautiful fonts. Typography is extremely important in design. Various fonts and typefaces carry a lot of meaning and character in the way that they look. Art Deco's need for advertising a rich, luxurious experience through travel posters called for a font that looked modern and classy. I think simple, easy to read fonts are great for modern graphic design, although certain projects may require something different, but generally speaking, if the client cannot read what's on the poster, it would be a bad design. This is my own take on an Art Deco inspired poster. I have used typography that is similar to that used in other travel posters from the 1920s, 1930s as inspiration. I incorporated the skyline of New York into my poster. I did this because of the effect Art Deco had on architecture at the time. I simplified the shape of the plane to only show the geometric shapes and included the sunburst background, which is commonly used in Art Deco design. In terms of colour, I was inspired by the poster Nirma. I wanted to use colours that also symbolised luxury, in which case I used purple. These different shades of purple really pop from the page. I recently did a project where I was required to create a drinks menu for an Art Deco themed cocktail bar. For inspiration, I looked at the history of the movement. I came up with the idea of using a 1920s passport as the menu. This was inspired by Art Deco's theme of travel, often seen with the many travel posters throughout the era. For the colour scheme, I used a blend of gold and blue that reflected the worldwide fascination with all things Egyptian in this era. This further gave it the feel of something that came from the 1920s. Again, I used fonts that felt modern and clean, and the use of straight, simplified shapes and curves. The font I used I felt looked classy and best reflected the theme of the bar. This particular movement has inspired many designers in modern day design, particularly for the design of the video game BioShock. The designers of this game had to create a visually immersive world relating to a time of escape and discovery. Art Deco was the perfect place to look for information to design a city they named Rapture. Rapture's underwater skyline is a direct reflection of New York City's, with its towering Art Deco skyscrapers like the Chrysler Building and Rockefeller Center and the Empire State Building. It's not beyond belief to think that the architects of Rapture, Simon and Daniel Wheels, would have been massively influenced by such artists as William Van Allen, who designed the Chrysler Building. In my opinion, Art Deco is still to this day a useful point of reference for design. Clean, crisp, stylized fonts and the use of geometric shapes gives a modern, sophisticated feel to artwork, while remaining simplistic and not too busy for the viewer. Due to the increase of printing technology at the time, this was essentially the start of mass graphic design, a point in history that is important for any designer to be familiar with. The artist I have chosen to research from the Art Deco era is A.J.M. Cassandra. He was born Adolphe Jean-Marie Morin in Ukraine to French parents. The popularity of posters as advertising gave him an opportunity to work for a Parisian printing house. He worked at the Hackard printing house at the Place de Madeleine in Paris until 1922, eventually saving up enough money for his own studio. Inspired by Cubism as well as Surrealism, he earned a reputation with works such as Boucheron, the woodcutter. a poster that won first prize at the 1925 Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs. A.J.M. Cassandra is best known for his posters advertising travel. This particular artist's work really concentrates on the mass distribution that comes with printing in the Art Deco era. Simplified geometric shapes give a real sense of speed to this particular poster, the Nord Express. His works display futurist inspiration with their energy and dynamism, which is exemplified in works such as Nord Express. Concentrating on the layout that Cassandra has used here, there is evidence that it fits in with the golden ratio. This is a common mathematical ratio found in nature that can be used to create pleasing, natural-looking compositions in my own design work. Another poster designed by A.M. Cassandra is the Brilliant Cycles poster. Here he has a simplified man riding a bicycle, simplified into geometric shapes. Using italic fonts and tilting the cyclist, he has created a sense of speed in the imagery. Because the image is more conceptual in its nature, I believe it is a more effective advert to advertise the company than a realistic drawing would be. The red circle at the bottom of the poster has letters from the word brilliant cut out. This reveals a neutral background colour. This adds variety to the image, keeping it interesting. This particular style of pictorial cyclist could be used in many aspects of design today, especially for company logos. An example of this is the WWF logo. The company created this reimagined version of a panda by breaking down a panda in simple geometric shapes. This use of inverted space lent itself well to the company logos. It's one of the most identifiable logos in the world, possibly inspired by A.M. Cassandra's simplistic style. This recurrent theme of having simplistic shapes lends itself well to standing the test of time. Many pictorial logos remain identifiable and timeless by being simplistic. The major benefit of pictorial logos is that they can easily be incorporated into marketing materials. In 1926, Cassandra co-founded the advertising agency Alliance Graphique and began experimenting with typography. Cassandra designed the famous advertising typeface Bifer. He later created the sans serif typeface Acier Noir in 1935. Cassandra's interest in typography led to some beautiful fonts being made, many of which iconic of the Art Deco era. He believed the text and imagery should work together visually when he created his artwork. Cassandra believed that a graphic design has to contain the solution to three problems. The optical problem, it must be designed to be seen and understood quickly. The graphic problem, you can never be too seductive. And the poetic problem, the image and the text must produce a mental association or trigger an emotion, holding the viewer in its grip. Using a similar approach to design, I created a poster for the bar Rubies. Simplified the image into shapes to give it an edgier, dramatic look. This was done in order to make the image seen and understood quickly. This allowed me to use less colours in the image, but in doing so I created a good contrast to make the information stand out more to the audience. In order to make the typography and the image look and feel associated with one another, I applied a texture to both elements. The slant of the type was aligned in order to add drama to the poster, almost as if the text is reacting to the presence of the main image. The proximity of the text to the image all adds to the effect and excitement of the design, much like A.M. Cassandra's work. When World War II approached, Cassandra served in the French army until the fall of France. His business shut down, he survived by creating stage sets and costumes for the theatre. When the war was over, he continued this line of work while also returning to easel painting. In 1963, he designed the well-known Yves Saint Laurent logo. In my opinion, we have a lot to thank A.M. Cassandra for in terms of design. His unique style translates beautifully into modern-day design. He had an intelligent method of using typography in his design work that many artists today still apply, including myself. I believe Art Deco is perfect for modern design work, especially the way we live today, where society has took a minimal approach to art and design. Art Deco slots in very well with the contemporary feel, with its sleek curves and simplistic geometric shapes. Even though the movement's popularity declined after World War II, there has been a resurgence in it due to contemporary design being more minimalistic.